While still labelled a plug-in hybrid, PHEV or PHEV, the BYD Shark 6 showcases a very different type of vehicle, not just to the ute market, but to the vehicle market in general. The tech behind it is sufficiently different to even other plug-in hybrids that has led to many misunderstandings even amongst car reviewers and car/auto experts. This video calls on a team with backgrounds in physics, chemical engineering, electrical engineering, and mechatronics to help clarify and address misunderstandings about that tech. And for now, leaves reviews of the features and build of the Shark 6 to others, such as Chris from Carnormous, Paul from Car Expert, and Robert from Life's Too Short for Boring Cars. The goal of this tech is a dual-mode vehicle, EV whenever practical and hybrid whenever not. But unlike ICE-based PHEVs that are often compromised as a hybrid and quite poor as an EV, this is technology that can deliver in both modes and cost less than a traditional ICE vehicle. Technology that can, even for a lifestyle ute pickup, neutralise many of the objections of righteous anti-car ownership crusaders and provide an answer when a pure battery electric vehicle isn't practical. Welcome to an EV video from One Finite Planet, the first in a series on the DM EV-based hybrid technology as used in the BYD Shark 6. Despite both being called just PHEVs or PHEVs, the technology of what I sometimes abbreviate to ePHEVs, the plug-in hybrids based on EVs, differs so significantly from the more common ICE-based plug-in hybrids, or ICE-PHEVs, that they could be considered two different vehicle types. Despite being the pioneer of the technology, BYD is not the first to bring ePHEVs to Australia or most other markets beyond China. But previous ePHEVs have suffered the curse of new technologies, a high early adopter price tag. Rather problematic when one of the advantages of the new technology is value for money, an advantage not realised until mainstream volumes are reached. BYD is the first to reach those mainstream volumes and consequently dominates the world market for plug-in vehicles, as explored in another video linked below. ePHEVs allow the features of a hybrid plus the ability to plug in when convenient, together with better value for money than comparable non-hybrids. This video focuses on the keys to understanding this technology revolutionising the auto industry. The DMO technology of the Shark is basically a ladder frame vehicle packaging of BYD DMI technology, but the Shark is chosen as a reference because it adds off-road and other applications and raises questions on torque, towing and loads. Here are the keys to how the technology can answer these questions. More in-depth information on EV motors and batteries can be found in the pages and videos which will be linked below, but the following keys are important for understanding the DM technology of the BYD Shark. The first key is, despite what is often said, electric motors don't produce power.
In terms of the electric motors, the front one produces 170 kilowatts of power and 310 newton meters of torque, which is absolutely mega. The rear one, 150 kilowatts and 340 newton meters of torque. So those numbers are really healthy.
Technically, saying an EV motor produces power is just as misleading as saying the local supermarket produces apples. The apples are produced elsewhere, but supplied by the supermarket. The power for vehicles is produced by chemical reactions, such as lithium iron phosphate reacting with carbon in an LFP battery, and as gasoline reacting with oxygen in a combustion engine. Electric motors don't produce power, they take power and convert it into movement, and their kilowatt rating is the limit of their capacity, not power production. Electric motors must be connected to the source of power that produces and supplies at least the right amount of kilowatts of power for the motor. In an EV, or typical ICE-based PHEV, there's only one source of power for the electric motors, the battery. The source of power never varies, so nothing more to think about. But both extended range EREVs and EV-based ePHEVs like the Shark are sort of an EV with half the battery replaced by a generator typically weighing less than half a battery and adding longer range and flexible fueling. That gives two sources of power that can be delivered by the electric motors, both able to access EV characteristics and torque. Most driving requires only one source or half: battery for urban driving at lowest cost, generator for longer range or when charging is impractical. Full electric power, 320 kilowatts with the Shark 6, requires both sources or halves working together. There are many advantages to using electric motors as traction motors, even when the power is produced by an internal combustion engine or ICE. And this is the reason almost all diesel locomotives use electric traction motors to convert power to motion. A motor produces motion, and this leads to thinking of electric motors as equivalent to combustion engines, which are sometimes also called motors, but are much more. Electric motors lack the ability of combustion engines to produce power and require a power source such as a generator or battery, leaving electric motors as in some ways more equivalent to just a transmission of power. When a motor has only battery power, whether the power source is the battery or the motor seems academic, but there are cases where understanding where the power comes from matters, and the tech of the BYD Shark is one of those cases. The second key is that with batteries, size matters. It determines power and lifespan as well as range. For any given battery technology, there's a C rating for charging, which gives the fastest time to charge, and another C rating, which provides the fastest time to discharge and determines the maximum rate of providing power. Note that the C ratings and times depend on battery technology, but are independent of battery size. Divide 1 hour by C rating to get how long to charge or discharge. For example, with a battery technology with a 2C rating, a full charge should take 30 minutes, regardless of battery size. Doubling the battery size, either by doubling the number of cells or the size of the cells, will result in a double-sized battery that takes no longer for a full charge, despite a full charge having twice the total energy. This means, generally, smaller batteries will have lower peak charging power. In this example, 60 kilowatts versus 120 kilowatts, and take just as long for their fastest charge, although they'll take less time to charge when charging power is limited. But the implications for delivering power can be more important. Power discharge C rates tend to be higher than charge C rates, so moving the example to 3C power discharge rate gives 90 kilowatt of max power for the smaller 30 kilowatt hour battery, 180 kilowatt max power for the 60 kilowatt hour battery. This is why EVs with small batteries have low power, and means as PHEVs have smaller batteries than EVs, they can produce less kilowatts from battery power alone. The third key is battery type/design, which together with size determines whether batteries last the distance. Battery size and vehicle efficiency determine range, and this in combination with number of cycles as determined by type and design reveals the distance that can be travelled before battery degradation, as shown in the formula. Tesla solved not only the EV performance but also battery life issues of lithium-ion batteries by keeping sizes to 60 kilowatt hours or more. If a PHEV is only 50% driven on battery power, then it can have a battery 50% of the size needed by a comparable EV, and a hybrid, capable of only a few kilometres at low speeds when on battery power alone, can have an adequate battery life with less than 5% of the battery size. But to make a hybrid that can be driven almost all of the time on battery power, you need either a full-size EV battery or to compensate using a long-life battery type like an LFP battery, which can provide 3 times the battery life of most other current EV batteries, and allow using 1/3 of the battery size for driving the same distance as a typical NCM/NCA battery. In summary, for a PHEV to actually be driven mostly on battery power, it needs quite a large battery, preferably of LFP or somewhat equivalent long-life design. The fourth key is that for vehicles, peak power is rarely used beyond in short bursts, and almost all driving is at much lower power levels. This creates a design challenge. Provide high peak power, but without compromising normal driving or efficiency on normal driving. Why only short bursts of peak power? Well, it's all that's practical. Consider peak battery power of the Shark 6. Total peak power is 321 kilowatts, and subtracting 135 kilowatts of ICE power reveals that peak battery power of at least 186 kilowatts. Divide the battery energy of 29.58 kilowatt hours by 186 kilowatts equals 0.159 hours, which means a full battery lasts only 9.5 minutes at maximum power. For comparison, the Tesla Model S Plaid has a 95 kilowatt hour battery, which at maximum power of 760 kilowatts will run flat in just 7.5 minutes. It's not just EVs either. The higher the maximum power, the less time it can be used for. Applies also to ICE vehicles, although most of the energy being lost as heat instead of moving the vehicle makes the calculation more complex. The closest to full power consumption figures I could find is consumption at maximum speed. And although, like the Tesla and the BYD, top speed of the Porsche Cayenne is electronically limited and not maximum power, I did find consumption data. I found test data for an automotive testing Papenburg in Germany of fuel consumption at speeds including top speed. And for example, the fuel consumption of the Porsche Cayenne Turbo S at 270 kilometers per hour, 160 mile per hour, was 66.7 litres per 100 kilometres, 3.5 miles per gallon. That means 27 times 66.7 litres per hour, which is just over 180 litres, 47.6 US gallons, of fuel every hour. All this highlights the continuous use of peak power consumes energy at a rate too inconvenient and expensive for most applications. All hybrids leverage this to some extent, trading gains in overall efficiency against reduced ability to continuously consume energy at the maximum rate as required to deliver continuous maximum power. This means a vehicle like the Shark can't do those rare jobs that require and justify consuming the Shark's entire 60 litre tank of fuel in just 20 minutes. This is why the Shark, with 320 kilowatts of power, only 16% lower than the Porsche, is limited to 160 kilometres per hour, which requires average power usage of only 160 kilowatts, in place of the 270 kilowatt limit of the Porsche, which would require close to full peak power of the Porsche and use 60 litres of fuel in less than 20 minutes. Over a full tank, the Shark is limited to an average of about 50% of its maximum power, which means around 1 hour is the fastest it will use the entire 60 litre tank. Not only does this require the 160 kilometre per hour limit to top speed, it also means things like towing loads with such high drag that more than 60 litres of fuel an hour would be needed will require a vehicle with either a bigger battery or a larger ICE and a much larger fuel tank. The fifth key is the advantages and torque of an electric transmission and how it enables use of super efficient Atkinson cycle engines. Ever wondered why diesel electric locomotives don't just use a gearbox and instead use the diesel engines to power generators that in turn power electric traction motors? The answer is that electric drive offers advantages over even the best gearbox, and torque is right up there on the list. This is a demonstration of EV torque. You can also find videos of the Cybertruck demonstrating impressive torque in comparison with combustion pickups using low range. But what about BYD? BYD is still a newcomer to off-roading, but they have demonstrated violent mode for vehicles with the same DMO technology as the Shark.
Called violent mode, and that is a mode that will allow this to deliver peak torque at as little as just 2 kilometers an hour. It's kind of impressive. BYD continuing to come up with new ways to destroy tires. They also say that they're going to push that via OTA to the BAL 5
violent mode. Violent mode apparently allows it to deliver peak torque to individual wheels at as little as 2 kilometers per hour or just over 1 mile per hour. So peak torque to the wheels, and you can control each wheel individually.
Violent mode has been added to both other BYD vehicles that use the same platform as the Shark. The Shark has around 20% less battery power than the vehicle in the videos, but the system should still be able to work. Using electric motors as a transmission for ICE power gives the ability to harness peak power and torque not just at 1 speed per gear, but at any speed and under any conditions. And that allows a complete rethink of what is needed for an internal combustion engine. Normal design constraints for low-end torque and drivability become irrelevant, with the goals reduced to just total power and efficiency. The reason the BYD Shark engine holds records for the world's most efficient gasoline combustion engine is largely because this high-efficiency engine is only practical for a brand with many vehicles where power from the engine will be delivered via electric motors. In the Shark 6, perhaps except for that one exact theoretical condition for a moment near top speed, maximum power and torque comes from using the ICE as a generator. Direct mechanical drive, only possible for the front wheels, is for extra economy when maximum power is not needed. The sixth key is understanding the potentially confusing labels of parallel hybrid and serial hybrid or series hybrid. Hybrid vehicles all use the combination of both battery and combustion engine power, but differ on how combustion engine power gets to the wheels. Most hybrids are technically capable of both parallel and series, allowing marketing material to claim both modes and making it best to think of parallel and serial as just modes. Parallel describes power connected to the wheels via a mechanical gear, and that connection being visualized as in parallel to the electric motors. And series describes when, in place of a mechanical link from the combustion engine to the wheels, power is sent electrically from a generator to a control unit, where it can then be combined with battery power and then the power to the electric motors. To put it more simply, parallel mode is using a mechanical transmission and series mode is using electric motors as the transmission. Both series and parallel modes each have advantages, as discussed in content link below. But in summary, in most conditions, series mode is more efficient, an exception being driving in the highest gear ratio at constant speed, because under these conditions, an electric transmission provides no advantage, and there are some losses from converting power from the ICE to electricity and then back. A major reason all extended range EVs effectively replace half the battery with a generator is for the extra range, as typically needed during long trips spent mostly at constant highway speed, which is when the direct gear link of EV-based EFEVs provides increased efficiency. ICE-based PHEVs have a mechanical gear for every speed. The Ford Ranger has 10. This enables use of parallel mode at any speed and in all conditions. EREVs, or extended range EVs, have no gears at all and thus no parallel mode and use only series mode. EV-based extended range EFEVs like the Shark have just one tall gear, which means they can use parallel mode only when that one tall gear is appropriate, and even then, only for to power the front wheels. While normally in series hybrid mode, in conditions where the Ford Ranger PHEV would be using ICE power and in top gear, the Shark would typically mechanically drive the front wheels, thus switching to parallel mode. Key number 7 is that batteries can't deliver power while being charged. Either current flows into a battery or out of a battery, but not both at once. This means that during charging, the vehicle can't be powered by the batteries and instead must be powered by power from the charger. Like a laptop or mobile phone, a vehicle can still be powered up while charging, but when powered up while charging, all power is coming from the charger. Understanding that power can't come from the battery while charging does not fit with confused comments like these.
Kick on the internal combustion engine to support charging the battery, which then runs the electric motors.
That only charges the 40 kilowatt hour battery in the car, and the battery pushes energy to the electric motors on the front and rear.
In series mode, the ICE engine would only turn on to charge the battery without turning the wheels.
Almost everyone gets the concept that the combustion engine is used to generate electricity, but over and over it's repeated that the electric power must go into the battery before it can power an electric motor. Surely everyone has seen some form of electric motor that's not powered by battery, be it their washing machine or just a household fan. This false statement that the combustion engine is mainly for charging the battery rather than mainly just powering the electric motors leads to a lot of confusion. Now consider 1. The BYD Shark will accelerate faster from 0 to 70 when using power from both battery and the combustion engine, even when the battery is fully charged. This is hard to understand without getting that both are sending power to the electric motors. Second, at speeds below 70 kilometers per hour, if the combustion engine is only charging the battery, then given you can't get power from a battery while it's charging, the vehicle would need to be constantly pausing charging to get bursts of power from the battery. Confusion is understandable. I even asked ChatGPT to see how it answered, and the first response was effectively, yes, you get power from the battery while charging, but you get it from the charger, not the battery. When I pushed for, but can you get power from the battery, it effectively responded, yes, just stop charging while getting the power. In the end, the best answer I got was the one on screen now. The main point is, when battery power is to be conserved, the combustion engine and its generator primarily power electric motors, as with a diesel-electric locomotive, and can, when required, also charge the traction battery. Note that in normal use, the goal is to only charge the traction battery by plugging in, as it's normally far more economical to charge from the grid, which is why you bother charging. Charging the battery by generator is for situations such as when camping or during a blackout, which justify the cost because there is no grid. Plus, when regen is insufficient to preserve minimum battery level, the battery will be topped up from extra power from the generator. Well, the answer to the popular question of what happens when the battery goes flat is, as with most vehicles, it won't start, but even worse, the battery will only go flat when you're also out of fuel for the generator. Well, that's it for Keys to the Technology. And while more videos on the Shark and details on the Shark implementation of the technology will be linked below, feedback is appreciated and questions welcome, so please discuss.